Well, the blame game has begun over the disastrous anti-tariff TV ad, which aired in the United States on the weekend and led to the termination of a new trade deal between Canada and the United States, a deal believed to have been all but done. But after seeing the ads, US President Trump canceled trade talks and announced an additional 10% tariff on Canada. He says it'll be a while before talks begin again. Now, US Ambassador to Canada Pete Hoekstra confirmed that a trade deal was imminent before the ads were released.
Canada burnt the bridges with America. Donald Trump did not slam the door. Canada slammed that door shut all by itself.
Anyway, Premier Doug Ford and Prime Minister Mark Carney appeared to be throwing each other under the bus over the fiasco. Carney said it was Doug Ford's decision to run the ads, not something the government of Canada would do during critical negotiations. Ford was having none of it.
President Trump says he's canceled these trade talks because he's upset about the Ontario government ad. We've heard from the Business Council of Canada and even some of President Trump's own advisors who suggest the frustration with Canada runs deeper. So is this about the ads or is this about something else?
I would suggest you take the president at his word for his reasons.
How are relations with the Prime Minister? Are things strained now because of what's happened?
Not at all. He saw the ad before I put it out, so did his chief of staff. They both saw it, and we moved forward on it. But again, we achieved our goal. As we say, mission accomplished. It was done.
Anyway, Carney would not confirm or deny that he saw the ads ahead of time, as Ford states. Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre said it was Carney who approved the ads and should accept the blame for the collapse of negotiations.
Mark Carney approved the ad, and then he claimed after the ad started running that the ad was the reason why no deal happened. So it's time for Mark Carney to come clean. He claims he was on the verge, once again, claims that he was on the verge of getting a deal. Then he approved the ad, and then he blamed the ad for the fact that there is no deal. So the reality is that premiers are stepping up to fill the void left behind by Mark Carney's broken promise. He said he would negotiate a win. He said he would have a deal by July 21st. Still no deal, still no win, still no elbows, still no jobs. And if I could, and now Mark Carney is looking for someone to blame for his broken promises, and he's blaming an ad that he approved. So it's time for Mark Carney to stop blaming others and start keeping his promises, his promise being that he would get a deal, that he would lower the tariffs, and that he would get the job done. He has not done that.
Meantime, Ford insists that the ads did exactly what they are intended to do. When asked if he owed Ontarians an apology, Ford doubled down.
The Prime Minister was explicit today in saying that it was the ad that derailed negotiations which were moving ahead. With that in mind, why don't you feel you owe Ontarians an apology?
For sticking up for Ontarians, well, let's talk about a so-called imminent deal. I've been hearing this for month after month after month, and if there was no mention about auto. It's about steel.
As you heard him there say, he'd rather have no deal than a deal that excluded the auto sector. Now, those who watched the opening ceremonies of the World Series were treated to this woke rendition of "Oh Canada." No wonder the Blue Jays lost.
Oh Canada, our home, our native land, true patriot love in all of us command.
Ouch. Maybe they'll do better tonight. Jocelyn Bamford is founder of the Coalition of Concerned Manufacturers and Businesses of Canada, and she joins us to talk a little bit about this whole anti-tariff ad fiasco. Welcome, Jocelyn.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
Well, you heard the various arguments. Now we've got Mark Carney and Doug Ford appearing to be at odds here with the blame game and the finger pointing, with Carney saying, look, this was an ad that was taken out and paid for by the province of Ontario. We would never do a thing like that, especially with negotiations going on. Ford says Carney saw the ads in the beginning, before they ran. So what's he talking about? I mean, is the bromance over between these two?
Now, you know what? I knew it right from the start. Doug Ford tweeted out that Mark Carney came to his house for dinner. This was the Friday before the ads, the week before the ads came out. He tweeted out about how they had a lovely dinner and talked about a whole bunch of variety of topics. And as soon as those ads came out, I was like, there's no way that they met for dinner and had a conversation of a variety of topics, and a $75 million ad buy right in the middle of negotiations would not have come up. It would be inexplicable. That just doesn't pass the smell test. So right from the start, when the liberal media was running with, Doug Ford is gone rogue, I was like, there's no way. This was planned between the two of them. Carney would say he has plausible deniability, and he would make Ford look like he's gone rogue. And I never bought it from the start. I don't buy it now. Now Ford is saying, yes, of course, Carney knew about it. And I believe that to be true. And so you hear from a variety of sources from the U.S. administration that a deal was imminent. They were coming out, just T's and C's. And it looks like the Canadians tank their own trade deal. So, why? Who benefits from the U.S. Canadian trade deal falling apart? It's certainly not Canadians, that's for sure. It's not the average Canadian. And we should be asking some pretty serious questions. Where did the $75 million come from? How was it funded? Did the federal government kick in any money? We should be looking for freedom of information on the funding of that deal.
Yeah, and Ford has come out recently and said, well, it's not going to cost quite $75 million because he paused the ads. I would ask, well, if the ads are so successful as you say they are, why pause the campaign? But he claims that no, the ads did exactly what they were intended to do. In the meantime, Carney has not confirmed or denied that he saw the ads in the ahead of time. I think he's looking for a way to kind of weasel his way out of this. I agree with you. There's no way he didn't see the ads. Him and his chief of staff, they saw the ads and probably said, well, go ahead. And it's blown up in the face of not only Ford, but Carney himself, because you have Pierre Poilievre who says, you got to come clean here, Prime Minister. You knew about it. And if you did know about it, then you should accept the blame for the collapse of those talks. And we'll have to just see how this plays out. But none of this looks good on any of the main players, either Ford or Carney. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And so why would they do it? Why would they tank a deal in the dying hours? And so, two things come to mind. One, we should ask ourselves, does Carney really just want to cozy up to Xi Jinping, the communist leader, and have a deal with him and say, oh, it wasn't my fault. It was Trump. Trump did it, and he broke off negotiations. And then the timing of these ads is suspect. There are two gubernatorial races going on, one in New Jersey, one in Virginia. Were they trying to influence the outcome of those two very tight races right now? Two traditionally blue states, although Virginia is Republican, but has traditionally been Democrat. So were they trying to influence the outcome of those elections? And these are all very concerning issues that that ought to see the light of day. We should discuss the reasons why, because who wants to cozy up with the regime that has dumped steel on time and time again on Canadian borders, has hurt Canadian manufacturers, and has held our Canadian citizens hostage? Who thinks that they're a better partner than the United States, who's our longest ally, friend, and neighbor?
Yeah, I mean, interfering in another country's affairs, internal affairs, is not a good look for Canada. We would certainly be outraged if the Americans were trying to do it to us in Canada. And yet here we are trying to influence possibly those two gubernatorial races but also the Supreme Court decision, which is coming out shortly, on the legitimacy and the legality of the use of these tariffs to begin with. And so, and I'm not the only one saying that. I mean, even John Manley, the former deputy leader of the Liberals, back in the day, we're going back a few years before Trudeau, but he came out and said, look, we wouldn't appreciate it if the Americans did it to us, took out those ads and ran them in our country. And so why would we expect them to appreciate it? I mean, but Ford is just, it seems like a bull in a china shop, and I'm not sure what his intentions are here. I think it's quite possible, to your point about Carney playing a duplicitous game here, trying to cozy up with Xi of China, and then using his flunky Doug Ford to do the heavy lifting, putting out these ads, pretending like pretending like he might not have seen them. He's not saying yay or nay, kind of subtly trying to distance himself from all that. Meantime, he was probably all in when he saw the ads, knowing full well the impact they might have.
Yeah, and the hypocrisy of Doug Ford, who, while pouring out the Crown Royal, told the cameras the LCBO is Crown Royal's largest customer. And is this how you treat your largest customer? Meanwhile, the United States is far ahead in terms of being Ontario's largest customer. And yet Doug Ford has seen fit to call the U.S. President all kinds of names, and continues to treat him terribly. And so Doug Ford should look in the mirror and follow his own advice and start treating his largest customer with some respect and try to get a deal. But I'm going to argue they don't want a deal because none of their behavior supports the fact that they want a deal.
Well, there's a whole thing about what kind of deal. And that's one thing that Ford was talking about, because he said, and it's probably true, and I don't know if that came out during that discussion with Pete Hoekstra when he was talking, because he's the U.S. ambassador to Canada. That deal that had been negotiated did not include autos. It was really about steel, aluminum, and I believe it was energy were the big three. And that was part of the negotiated agreement. I'm going to suggest that Ford got wind of what was in that deal. He may not have seen it, but he got wind of what it dealt with, and then upended the chessboard when he found out that cars were not going to be part of it. So do you think that that's a possibility here? And what's the wisdom of, say, refusing to accept half a loaf in this case, knowing that maybe you can negotiate an auto deal down the road, but in the meantime, hey, let's get some relief in manufacturing of steel. Let's get some, relief in energy, aluminum. That doesn't make any sense to me, but that seems to be his attitude here. Without auto, if I can't protect the auto sector and the auto jobs, well, then to hell with the steel jobs as well.
Yeah, it is. The whole thing is inexplicable. It makes no sense the way that they've been behaving right from the get-go. If your largest customer is upset with you, any business person would hop on a plane and go visit with their largest customer and find out what's fussing them and try to negotiate a way forward. But that's not what our prime minister did. His first trip abroad was to Europe, and you continue to see them put trial balloons of maybe we should get a little cozier with communist China, and it's the Liberals have a clear pattern. They have somebody write a op-ed in the media. They put out a trial balloon, and then they roll out policy. And you can look at it on a number of contentious issues. That's how they roll, and that's what they've been doing. So, I mean, as a mother, I do not want to cozy up with China. Everybody should be aware of the Davidson window, which is when the United States believes that Xi Jinping is going to invade Taiwan. If you want to be really afraid and stay up at night, look at how many warships the Communist Chinese Party is rolling out. We in North America just can't compete with the level of shipbuilding and warships that they're rolling out. So to cozy up with a regime that has again and again stole our intellectual property, dumped steel and aluminum onto our shores, haven't followed our trade rulings, and continue to be a threat to our democracy, influence our elections. It makes no sense. Why would you want to cozy up to them versus getting a deal with our largest trading partner? It makes no sense to me.
Unless you're a complete radical yourself and just, putting out this idea that, no, you're a moderate, I think these guys are not what they purport to be. I think they've got their own little agenda. And to your point, these guys break things and then use the breakage that they created to push their own agenda. And all you have to do is look at the crime, which they created. Their policies created an explosion in crime. And what do? They use that as an excuse to go after legal firearms ownership in Canada. This is the way these guys think. Let's create a problem and then we'll propose the solution, even though that solution has no relationship to the problem that they created. I don't trust these people. As far as I'm concerned, Carney's a snake in the grass, and we'll just have to see how this whole plays out. Now, of course, he is in China, or in Asia rather, for this conference in South Korea, and so we'll have to see what he comes out of there, because I've heard that Trump has made a number of announcements and partnerships, including one involving rare earth minerals with Japan. And so, I mean, that's an agreement he should be signing with Canada, rather than going to Asia to get, rare earth minerals. We've got them in Canada. And yet, rather than signing a deal with Trump on rare earth minerals, he goes over there and signs it. So that should show you what kind of attitude he has about Canada right now. But I want to also ask you about a graph that you produced, some series of numbers about investment related to outflows of capital from Canada by the billions, and to the United States. And in a way, you're part of that, because of course you expanded your plant in the United States. It made sense for you considering your clients. But many of your colleagues at the Coalition of Concerned Manufacturers and Businesses of Canada, same deal. They're looking and go, this makes no sense staying here. We tried. We really have tried. We'd love to grow in Canada, but we can't. And so they start looking south, and they move to states like Ohio and Virginia and whatever, Pennsylvania or any other state. Maybe you could talk a little bit about the outflow of capital.
Yeah, so this you can get this on any website. I always encourage people to do your own research, but this is the outflow of capital from Canada to the United States, and starting to ramp up in 2015 and 17, and then just hockey sticking as we're going up. So what drives that? I'm going to argue there's unaffordable energy is one of the reasons that people have sought to either move or to move growth into the United States. So what goes into unaffordable energy? Unaffordable electricity. Doug Ford was elected for a mandate to fix the electricity, which the cost was driven up by wind and solar contracts, to make it unaffordable for not only people in their homes, but running manufacturing plants. So unaffordable electricity on the federal government is carbon tax, clean fuel standards, industrial carbon tax, all of those things. There are not in the United States. And when you look at Canada contributing less than 1.5% of greenhouse gases, you have to ask yourself, why? Why would they do this to Canadians? And then what happened with all that carbon tax money? It went into the Sustainable Development Technology Corporation. And that the Auditor General went in there and said there was waste, fraud, and abuse. And that's why the government was prorogued. And we still don't have answers. Where's our carbon tax money? Because we paid over $600,000 in carbon taxes, and we want our money back. If that money went to friends and people that did not do anything to contribute to lowering greenhouse gases or making the environment any better, it was just money extorted from us and fraudulently used. And I want my money back. That is money I could have given a bigger bonus to our people. We could have hired more people. We could have bought equipment. And the fact that Canadians are so apathetic, like they don't care about anything, how much waste, fraud, and abuse are Canadians going to stand up for? They are taking food from your kids' mouths, and ruining your children's future. And the apathy of Canadians is stunning. So, why do people move? Unaffordable energy, red tape. They just keep adding the red tape, both federally and provincially, onto us. The inability to get any projects done, expansion, the amount of red tape and studies and consultant fees you have to pay, it just makes it unaffordable. And instead of somebody sitting down and going, Houston, we have a problem, capitals fleeing to the United States, there seems to be no appetite to look at and do some analysis and ask people why they're leaving. Doug Ford's response to companies moving growth or packing up and leaving is to demand that everyone boycotts them instead of sitting around and asking them what's going on. And that will continue to go in this direction until there is a politician that wants to sit down and listen to why capital's fleeing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all we hear from Ford is Trump this and Trump that. I mean, I understand he wants to blame the United States. There's this strong sense of righteous indignation on the part of the premier and many other people that somehow, we're being betrayed, that Trump wants to destroy Canada. I don't think he wants to destroy Canada. I think he wants to repatriate, millions of jobs that left the United States over the course of decades. And I understand that. But I think I would tell my fellow Canadians, it's not Trump's responsibility to prop up our economy. It's not his job is to take care of his people. I wish our government here was as committed to improving the lives of Canadians as Trump is committed to improving the lives of Americans. Again, somehow we think that they owe us. They don't owe us anything.
Yeah, it's the total attitude of entitlement. The Liberal government's been in power for almost 10 years. The Ford government has been, over 8. What have those two governments done to bring back manufacturing, have a manufacturing strategy, get affordable energy? What have they done to improve the lives of Canadians, especially the middle class, bring back high-paying, high-skilled manufacturing jobs? And what have they done to protect our freedoms and liberties? Because I'm going to argue that flight of capital has just as much to do with people being concerned that the government's going to encroach their rights, their liberties, and the money that they have spent their lives working towards, as it is for anything else. So people are leery of the government. They saw what happened during the lockdowns. They saw what happened when the bank accounts were frozen. And if anybody values freedom and liberty, that's a scary prospect. So in talking to some business owners, I've seen that was also a concern, that they have worked and spent many hours. If you know any entrepreneur, it's not a 9-to-5 job. It's a 7-by-24 job, and they have worked hard. A lot of them have intellectual property that they've invested in, new inventions, and they're concerned with the encroachment of their freedoms. So it's the death by 1,000 cuts, and people just throw up their hands finally and say, there's not going to be prosperity. There's poor policies by not only the federal Liberals, but the Ontario Conservatives. And they finally get to the point where they have to move their growth because their business prosperity and their companies are at stake.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they treat businesses like garbage, and then they turn around and throw billions of dollars at massive corporations who don't really need the corporate welfare, but they say, here you go, take this money and build EV plants. And what do we get to show for it? As a result of this tariff war, Stellantis has moved, GM is moving, the truck plant out in Quebec, downsizing, ultimately these companies are going to look after their own interests. And if the economic environment changes, away they go. And part of that, of course, when you're talking about subsidies, as soon as the government money runs out, what do these people do? It's just like, see you later, because you've got the same problems that add to costs for the corporations that add to costs of companies like yourself. You know what I mean? It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, and we've spent years, our first choice is to grow in Canada. We're Canadians, we're proud Canadians. But eventually you have to make sure that the company is going to be strong, and sometimes you need to grow in another area. If all things were equal, I'm sure every single one of those companies that have either moved growth to the United States would rather just stay here. It's difficult running multiple plants. You have to travel a lot. Most people would just rather stay home, but we are being pushed out by bad government policies, and that's not good for Canadians.
Absolutely not. Last question, I want you to maybe mention something about that billboard campaign that you've got going on.
Yeah, so we the coalition has taken out a billboard campaign in Ontario, simply stating Ottawa is more detrimental to Canadians than Washington, D.C. To get Canadians to wake up from their slumber and understand that the poor government policies is what causing the pain, not President Trump. It's Prime Minister Carney, and it's some of the premiers that have poor policy that are hurting ordinary Canadians. But interestingly enough, on that, those ads ran on a private billboard company, some of which were in the city of Peterborough's arenas. And the city of Peterborough, for that benign ad just saying that Ottawa is more detrimental than Washington, D.C., that billboard company was forced to take those billboards down in Peterborough city properties because they said they were divisive political ads. It's stunning.
Oh my
it's
gosh.
Stunning, folks. They are coming after your ability to speak freely and to view your opinion, and they are taking over our media. They're taking over billboard companies. It's alarming what's happening, and Canadians need to be aware, because once your freedoms are gone, they're not coming back. And that is horrifying. Canada was proud. Canada did their part to make sure that we had freedoms in the First and Second World War, and we're allowing our government to take those freedoms away, and we're not even putting up a fight. So,
sad.
And another reason why a lot of Canadians are looking at opportunities south of the border is they're just saying, I can't stay. If people are going to fight, I'll stay, I'll entrench, I'll fight. But when people have such apathy to losing their freedoms and losing their liberties, then a lot of people just finally say, I want to go where people value those things. I want to go and make sure that my kids have those things that our forefathers fought for. And so
Absolutely.
Canadians need to wake up and smell the coffee, because it's not getting better, folks.
No. Yeah, it's long overdue in the waking up department. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Jocelyn. Great
My
chatting
pleasure, Mark. Always great to spend some time with you and your listeners.
Jocelyn Bamford. And that is it for this edition of Straight Up with Marc Patrone. Appreciate you tuning in, my friends. Let's do it again real soon, shall we? Bye-bye for now.